The idea is again, is if the children, if we learners, all of us, if we don't have an environment in which when we have a need we're able to articulate it and come forth with it, then we're learning not to have those kind of needs. And so the point isn't so much to have hyper travel in all kinds of different directions or multimedia for the sake of multimedia. The point is to be relevantly engaging with respect to what's engaging for a given individual, which means that it needs to modify itself or be available in multiple different representations, alternative representations, that rather than being prescribed for the learner, that what we're creating, if you will, what I call or what I characterize as relevancy bubbles. These bubbles of information and resource support that a learner's come into, and that when they come into, they've got an intuitive sense of the architecture or layout within these bubbles. So that if they have a particular need to look at it differently, they can go to a particular spot within it, so to speak, and see it more scientifically or more poetically, or the beauty of it. And that if they encounter a need with respect to the surface, a word, term, phrase, who is that person, what does this mean, that they can also act on those needs. And in some cases, those needs will not allow them to, the systems will not have the resources they need, right? In which case they need to be able to, let's say, genre. Genre, in this case, because I just built this, doesn't have any, it doesn't have encyclopedia, and I wanted one. I wanted to know elaborately what that meant. So by pressing a button, I go into the mode of sending information behind the screen to the people that are developing this, and I say, the feedback is genre. I wanted encyclopedia, there wasn't one. I hit the button, and it's been sent off. It's been dispatched like a message back to who's ever evolving this course that a learner was here, and they had a need here, and there wasn't a resource to help them. I mean, how else can curriculum content evolve? Except by being in contact with what people's needs are in relationship to it. The other part of this is that, let's say that the point of the class was, as they encountered things like this, to create the material, to create the resources for other learners. So in that case, they make, yeah, in the constructionist sense. So here they may say, well, let's go in again and let's make a, do the encyclopedia again, and this time we'll go into the publish mode. So I could find out from other parts of the world what genre meant, type it in here, and publish it, and boom, it's available to the other students. And I don't have to know anything about how to link this to that thing. I don't have to know anything about the architecture of the system. All I have to do is be able to point at something and then use the system to bring tools to bear on that meaning space. I say meaning space for a number of levels because I think that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about how is it that just as the children become facile walkers in physical space, facile swimmers in a swimming pool, how do they become facile walkers and swimmers in meaning space? And what do they need to help them be able to do that? What kind of responsivity in the world? That's what this is about. And again, I'm not about the technology. This is not as important as the cultural community attitude that fosters this kind of relationship that we're concerned with, because if that exists, then the technology is going to come from everywhere. The technology is going to follow your value systems. If your value systems value pumping knowledge, you're going to get great knowledge pumps. We talked about the learner scope a while ago, and that we had to have this scope that the learner could kind of adjust these lenses to be able to come into focus and come home with whatever the learning objective was that the curriculum was mandating and or that they were pursuing. The teacher needs to have the same thing, but here they're coming home with what are the kind of problems that are actually happening for my learners in this area of meaning. How do I see that? How do we develop a teacher scope? So the teacher is now seeing the learners in relation to what they're learning through it. And so how is it that what the learners are learning through are informing what the teachers are learning through? And how is it that what the teachers are learning through are informing what the district's learning through about how to focus and design its resources? Without that kind of an infrastructural concern for learning, and technology just being a servant of it as opposed to the end-all in itself, then I think we're going to go off the track. Yeah.
How do you propose to reach those software developers or to reach the people that are buying the
One of the things I'm sure that you know or you've run up against is that one of the real problems has been that the traditional developers of educational content, okay, have got, I'll call it a problem in syncing up with the software developers, right? They're kind of in different leagues, in different worlds. I started the process about 6 years ago of meeting with textbook publishers and authors and trying to crawl into their frame of reference and find out why they thought software people were some kind of aliens not to be listened to. And likewise, the software people are all, everything's got to be hyper-infinite everything, and any kind of structure is a sin. And that's equally ridiculous to the, right? So I started to ask, well, what kind of technology not only deals with the learners and deals with the educational curriculum need to learn about learners, but that can create an environment in which we don't need software developers. We don't need software developers to create experiences. The teachers, the children themselves, primarily, the way this system works is, this system is designed to start with the teacher and or professional content creators creating what I call a seed crystal, the beginning seed of intention with respect to one of the representations, one way home, maybe the central thread or a scientific or a poetic, one way home, and some references to support the one way home. And that what we do is we drop that into a classroom or a pool of learners and say, look, there's more than one way home here. Create them. And so the same tool that they're learning through becomes the environment in which they create to now build a cluster of related materials that help other learners go home there, and that these modules are what populates the sea of this kind of content. And it's something that can be done by anybody. And if we had the time, I'd show you more about the authoring system and how that works. But it's as easy for somebody to author materials that operate in this environment as it is for somebody to learn from them. They don't have to know anything about structural relationships between any kind of links about anything. They just deal with what something means and what are its media attributes. That's all. And place it into the sea that allows this match to occur between learners and resource materials. I'm not sure that answers your question. It may have gone a couple of different directions, but I am very sensitive to the fact that without the kind of support from the people that will make the initial content, that there won't be the things that create the scaffolding for initial buy-in and engagement. I mean, at a business level, I'm aware of that. And I have sought out the kind of alliances and connections to make sure that that's possible. And so far, what I think has been unique about what we're trying to do is in addition to the conversation we've had, we've been able to bridge the gap between the traditional author, the software developer, education, so as to demystify it and how it can be used here.
Alguna gente parece feliz, no importa lo que hagan, mientras otros tienen problemas encontrando un trabajo que los satisfaga, dijo psicólogo industrial Richard Harvey.
Because this is all based upon a kind of geometry of meanings rather than on links, rather than on brute force finds, there's a leverageability in this, what we call these relevancy bubbles, the way that they grow, that allow us to have alternative languages support what something means, just as well as having alternative representations or points of view. So this can deal with, again, different language levels, different dexterity levels, different ways to look at something.